Good morning, everybody. Myself, Prasad, on behalf of Password Publishing House, would like to invite you all for the much-awaited event, Decoding NEP from a school perspective. Password as an institution, since its inception, has been trying its level best to bring in quality into the publishing domain with its custom-built and future-ready textbooks. We stand tall today with the presence of our books in 1,000+ schools in India. We have been on a mission to help our client schools with the finest possible support even during the pandemic. Through a series of online programs for our client schools for diverse audiences, we are in a constant endeavor to deliver simply the best. In this regard, Password would love to take real pride in welcoming you all for today's event, where the key concerns of our client schools will be clearly addressed. To guide us today, we have with us experts and mentors in the industry. So let me take a few minutes of time to introduce the speaker and very importantly, the moderators for the day. Our keynote speaker for the day is Dr. Shakila Shamsu, formerly Officer on Special Duty, Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education, Government of India, Secretary to the committee which drafted the NEP 2020. As a lead moderator for today's session, we have with us Dr. Deepa Chandran, who is the President's Best Teacher Awardee 2016 and currently the Senior Principal at Sri Sharada Vidyalaya Senior Secondary School, Cochin. We have with us Mr. Francis K., who is the Principal of Naipunya Public School, Cochin, and he is also General Secretary, All Kerala Sahodaya School Complexes. We are blessed to have the presence of Dr. Vinamon Via, former President, Dakshin Sahodaya School Complex and Principal, Adarsh Vidya Kendra, Nagargoil. And joining us from the middle is Mr. T. Prem Kumar, CBSE Best Teacher Awardee 2017 and Principal, Indian Education School, Kuwait. We also have with us Professor Dr. George Kolanchiri, Principal, Crescent Public School, Chalapudi, and he was a former Dean at Purdue University, US affiliate. Let me welcome Dr. Deepa Chandran now for the official welcome address and for the introduction of today's speaker. Over to you, ma'am.
Prime Minister of India addressing on the national education policy, he was stressing on from the school level onwards, where he addressed some of the issues, which is learning to read and read to learn, and a system where thinking is being encouraged and beyond classrooms, mathematical thinking, logical thinking, connecting with real world, and then the developing of 21st century skills. And what struck me was I think for me as a principal and as a teacher was we are centering around everything in our academics that is around the mark sheets. And for parents, as he said, marks has become a marks prestige sheet, and for students it has become a mental pressure sheet. So in this time of COVID, when we all have to put our heads together to struggle to bring out the best, we have this wonderful opportunity today given to us by the Password Publishing Company. As he has already briefly described, we are lucky to have with us today as a speaker none other than the person who was involved in the framing of these national education policy. Dr. Shakila Shamsu, ma'am, I'm so happy that I'm able to share this platform with you today. Thanks to Password for that. On the topic of new education policy being decoded in the department, you have served in the Department of Higher Education, MHRD, and also the nodal officer of the flagship of the scheme of National Mission on Teachers and Teaching. So she's be the right person to address you today. She has been the secretary to the committee to draft national education policy. Prior to this, she held senior positions, OSD, the 12th Plan, MHRD, and Joint Advisor of Education Planning Commission. Her core areas cover education planning and policy making, teacher education, ICT-enabled learning, open and distance learning, and of course the inclusive education. Her academic career spans over 39 years, and in which 14 years in the government of India mainly. And she is a person who is holding a degree in PhD in education, gold medalist from the University of Mumbai for her master's degree and distance education and degree in law. And number of articles she has written in the international journals, and also she has made some contributions in the books. She has been in the several committee which was preparing the plan documents and reports on various aspects of education. She has delivered keynote address at several national and international conferences also. Now, it's really a privilege to invite you, madam, to speak on today and share your views with us. And we are happy that I am also happy to share this day, welcoming you all, Mr. Francis K.A., the General Secretary, and a colleague of mine and a friend of mine, Mr. Binu, Principal, Adarsha Vidya Kendra. We have from the Gulf, Indian Education School, Kuwait, Mr. Prem Kumar sir, who are all very well known and very close to me, and Dr. George Koranjeri from the Chalakudi, the principal of Crescent Public School. All these people are in the panel, and I am sure this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to hear and to interact, and it will be beneficial for people who all are lending their ears to this, this decoding of NEP 2020. Ma'am, I welcome you on all of us on this behalf of Password also to decode this NEP 2020 as you were in part of framing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Deepa Chandran and Mr. Prasad, and the co-moderators who are here today, Mr. Francis, Dr. Binumon, Mr. Prem Kumar, Professor George. It's a pleasure to be part of this particular event being organized by the Password Publishing House, and share with you my thoughts on decoding and demystifying the recommendations of NEP 2020 with respect to the school perspective. At the outset, let me mention to you that the policy, you must have all read it. It's not for the sake of rhetoric. It's based on the 5 guiding pillars or goals of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. At the same time, I think before I really get down to the recommendations, and let me also make it very clear, the Password Publishing House has shared the concerns that many of you in the school sector have about the recommendations. And I hope in the discussions that emerge today, many of the misgivings and apprehensions can be set to rest. And as Dr. Deepa, who I'm happy has heard the Honorable Prime Minister's address, and coming from the Prime Minister himself, where we were able to convince him about many of the recommendations in the NEP that is set to transform the educational landscape, and the nuanced manner in which he presented it, almost as good as an educator, gives you the idea as to the kind of work that had gone into the making of this policy so that it finally got its approval. But any policy, let me also mention, will always have 2 sides of it, or maybe even 3 sides of it, because there will be some who would be strongly supporting it like us, who made the policy, practitioners who would have 2 views of it, and a third group for various reasons who would like to oppose it for the sake of opposing it. And let me be very upfront about it. And we have seen that when we bring out plan documents, when we bring out policies, this is a general trend that we are quite familiar with. Now, coming to the NEP itself, as far as the policy is concerned, it looks at education as a single continuum. We're looking at from age 3 onwards to 18 as far as the school education is concerned, and 18 onwards into the higher education to touch upon professional education, to look at technical education, agriculture, law, and then the regulatory system and cross-cutting themes of vocational education, which cuts into both school and higher education, technology in education, internationalization, and so on. And the basic philosophical foundations of NEP 2020, which I would like particularly the school fora to understand, is that you've all possibly read the UNESCO report for learning in the 21st century, which talks about, there's a Jacques Delors Commission report, which talks about the 4 pillars of learning to know, which is knowledge-based, learning to do, which is learning with your hands and the vocational education and actually applying it, learning to be and to, learning to live, together and to live with others, which is the idea of coexistence and the values that need to come about in a very sustainable manner. And finally, learning to be, where the individual potentials of every single child needs to be nurtured. And it is this which flowed into the policy in the introductory chapter, where we have outlined 22 cardinal principles on which this policy has been outlined, where the very first principle itself says to identify, recognize, and nurture the unique potentials of every child, and to track that for the holistic development of the child. So as school educators, which is the fora that I'm addressing today, where you all are really laying the foundation, because the higher education with which I come from is actually getting almost a finished product. And we are only then subsequently looking into the university education and learning for a knowledge society. But the foundational part of it is all prepared in the schooling sector. And I'm therefore extremely happy to be here today to address the school principals and the educators who are largely in that particular vertical, and also maybe, if possible, remove some of your apprehensions. So having said that, our commitment is to have the 4 learning pillars being embedded in the policy. The policy is learner focused. It places the teacher as the centrality of this policy, and it empowers the educational institutions, whether they're schools or higher educational institutions. And it looks at the other stakeholders, the civil society and the parents, who make a lot of difference to the child's evolution in the learning paradigm. And therefore, that trajectory of learning that the child is being exposed to is not just being driven by the teacher, it's also being driven to a great extent by the social milieu in which that child exists. And therefore, the kind of right molding that the teacher has to play, and the centrality, therefore, of the teacher and the teaching system becomes very critical. Now, the main recommendations of school education, I think all of you are aware, and I'll just put that in a nutshell so that it's there up front for all of you. A strong focus on early learning through the early childhood care and education. A strong attempt to address the learning crisis through the foundational literacy and numeracy mission. This being a part of a new curricular and pedagogical structure, which is the 5+3+3+4. Then coming on to the aspects of optimal learning environments that we want. And with the 5+3, let me go back to the 5+3+3+4. It's a curricular restructuring. Therefore, the curricula has to be flexible. The pedagogical approaches will have to change from rote learning to experiential-based learning and activity-based learning. And obviously, the assessment systems will have to be aligned in keeping with the curricula, in keeping with the teaching learning processes, and therefore the assessments will also have to test the actual, let us say, conceptual understanding and the critical thinking qualities or the cognitive abilities or the other capacities that the child would have acquired in this new learning paradigm that we are talking about. And then coming on to the equity part of it, and how without inclusive education, you cannot have quality education being sustained. The whole reforms that we are talking about in teacher education, where we are talking in terms of the very significant changes that will have to come about in the curricular framework for teacher education itself, which prepares teachers for teaching school children, and therefore the need for a revision in the national curriculum framework for teacher. Incidentally, there are 4 new curricula that is going to come about in school education. And that is the National Curricular and Pedagogical Framework for Early Childhood Care Education, the National Curriculum Framework for School Education, the National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education, and the National Curriculum Framework for Adult Education. Technically, the literacy part of it also is a part of the mandate of the Department of School Education and Literacy. And therefore, in the Ministry of Education, they look at adult literacy. And it is significantly so because when we talk about this policy, which is committed to the SDG 4 goal of the UN Development Goals, which reads as to provide inclusive and quality equitable education to all and lifelong learning opportunities to all. Therefore, the literacy goals go along with the school education goals that we talk about. And then coming to the governance part of it in the schools, the reforms that we have tried to suggest with respect to school governance and the school complexes, and talking about school accreditation system as well as a school standards authority and a new school quality assessment and accreditation framework to be brought about. Now, this is the broad picture that I have just tried to touch upon, and let me just, in the 15 minutes that I have, try to just touch upon each of these. Now, the early childhood care and education is emanating from the fact of the evidence which says that just as in health, you say that the first 1,000 years of a child, 1,000 days of a child are very critical for the health and the nutrition, and determines how the future health of the child, how would be the health pattern of the child as the child goes into advanced stages. Similarly, we have seen that the ages between 3 to 6, in fact, it's 0 to 6, but we are saying 3 to 6 is where the maximum cumulative brain development happens. And if many of you have watched the webcasts that have been happening, and if some of you have not watched the webcast of the Ministry of Human Resource, the Ministry of Education that happened in the school conclave, maybe on 10th and 11th of this month, I would urge you, because these are available on the ministry website, where we have actually tried to show in the implementation plan which the Secretary School had mentioned about the actual picture of the brain, where a child who is exposed to the early childhood care and education and someone who is not exposed to early childhood care and education, how the neural synapses happens and how the neurons in the brain starts connecting to actually start a process where the child's brain development encourages assimilation, cognition, understanding, relationships, coordination. All these things happen in that very critical stage between 3 to 6 years. And this 3 to 6 years in the current scenario is not being given to every single child. It is being provided for only children coming from the socio-economic sections who are well-to-do, the elite sections who send their children to the preschools and the play schools. And a word of caution here, the current system of preschools and play schools, except for a very few who have understood what early childhood care is, actually a downward progression where children are actually using paper and pen. That is not to be done at all. You're harming or stunting the child's growth altogether. Just a minute, please. You are actually stunting a child's growth when you actually start telling them to use teaching learning material. It has to be fun-based, it has to be joyful, it has to be discovery-based, and it is very, very critical that existing preschools, many of you who are here today, must understand that if this is what you've been doing, you've been damaging the child's inquisitiveness, curiosity, creativity, by actually trying to get a 3-year-old to start rattling off ABCD or start saying 2 + 2 is 4. That is not the way you need to address that at all. And this policy is talking about a curricular and a pedagogical framework for early childhood care and education, which will actually promote joyful, play-based, discovery-based, curiosity-driven, creativity-driven learning for the children from the 3 to 6-year-olds in a collaborative manner with the current Anganwadi system, which in the allocation of business of the Government of India is being taken care of by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. So in collaboration with the Ministry of Women and Child, Health and Family Welfare, because of health and nutrition and education being 3 coordinated parallels that go together, in collaboration with these ministries, including the tribal affairs, so that children in these tribal areas also get a good exposure to early child care and education. They are trying to implement what may be seen as a very strong foundation by a proper early childhood care education. And this is being outlined in a 4-fold strategy. Time does not permit me to touch upon that, but I think many of you have already read that. Now the second, and before I touch upon the foundational literacy, let me tell you why we talked about the 5 + 3 + 3 + 4. It is not the physical restructuring of the schools. Many schools seem to be having this concern that we may have to start reshuffling our own physical infrastructure to suit this new paradigm. Absolutely not. We are only saying that the approach to learning, because of the way in which the cognitive development happens, because in the manner in which age-appropriate learning happens, the manner in which children need to actually be given something which is very fundamental first and then be advanced later, we have demarcated the ages between 3 to 18 into 4 stages. saying that the first stage is the foundational, which includes the early child care and the grades 1 and 2, covering the ages between 3 to 8. Then the 8 to 11, which is the preparatory stage. Then the 11 to 14, which is the middle stage. And then the secondary stage, which is between 14 to 18, which we call the secondary stage. So the approach of the learner's ability to learn and encouraging the learner to learn is what the teacher will have to do now, and not put in a lot of content on the child, which then becomes a burden, and where you convert all children to become robots. One of the most damaging statements given by NASA is that children think differently when they are young, when they are a child. Once they come out of the schooling system, they all think alike. We have converted and structured them in such a manner that we have lost their ability to be creative, to be able to think differently, to be critical, and made them nothing but robots. The new education policy, through the changes that it envisages in the school education, wants to create thinking children, wants to create creative children, and wants to emphasize on the fact that just because someone is not good at academics, you cannot condemn that child to be a non-performer. And that is where the flexibility in the courses have come, and the barriers that we are talking about of curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular to go, arts and science to go, vocational and academic to go, and allow children to choose from a bouquet of courses, because capacities are related to multiple intelligences that children have. And you are actually not nurturing those multiple intelligences. You are actually not making them become mindful. You're not making them learn with their senses. All this is critical to the holistic development of the child. And accordingly, the teaching learning processes will have to be adapted. Now, the foundational literacy and numeracy is to address a current crisis where you have damaging reports like ACER telling that a standard student cannot do the basics of reading and writing of a third standard student, and so on. And this learning crisis is what we seek to achieve by looking at it in a mission mode, to look at early learning by focusing on foundational literacy and numeracy, with greater emphasis, of course, on the 3 R's, as many of us are familiar with, but also going beyond that to look at holistic learning. Because if you watch the webcast and Vinita Kaul, she was saying actually just focusing on foundational literacy, we should not be minimizing it to just the 3 R's, but should look at the early learning in a total package, and therefore and also understand the interrelationships between these stages that are taking place, and all aspects of listening, of speaking, of reading, of writing, all of them going together in the foundational literacy and numeracy. Now, on the part related to the teaching learning, where many concerns have come, and maybe I'll take it up when the panel discussion happens, all that I'm trying to say is that the teachers shift from being, where we are forcing some information onto a child, has to change and allow child's critical ability as the child's level. That is, if there are 30 children in the class, recognize that these 30 children do not start at the same level. 30 children may start at 30 different levels, and that adaptability becomes very critical. I'll go on to explaining that if there are queries that come, but for the examinations, we have tried to say that you need to move away from high pressure stakes exams. We try to actually test what the child has understood and applied in real life, and make their learning contextualized so that they are able to relate to that, rather than give them examples of Mesopotamia where they have not even seen or heard of what that place is, and talk about fruits that grow in Mesopotamia. So you have to contextualize the education, and examinations will test these aspects. So as the progress card that we are talking is the holistic progress card, which will not only just give marks for the exams or the courses, but will test but will actually reflect all other aspects of the child's growth and progress, to touch upon these maybe sporting abilities, language abilities, discipline, values, how he behaves with other children, what is the kind of, let us say, social commitment that the child has, citizenship values, other aspects of extension that can be taught about. At the same time, try and identify if there are gifted children and try to make them sort of fast track them so that they are able to go ahead much other than the others. In all these exercises, the principles of sustainability, we have talked about equity and providing enabling ecosystems to nurture those who come from the socially and economically disadvantaged groups, including those with learning disabilities, including those who are living in geographically difficult regions, and those coming from difficult circumstances like vulnerability and trafficking and transgenders. All these categories have been put together as the SEDGs. On the school complexes, the whole idea is that limited resources and the need to leverage the resources in an optimal manner, where we would like to have the public school, the government schools and the government aided schools coming together to share their physical resources, physical infrastructural resources, as much as the teaching resources together, including the human resources like the teachers, is an attempt to actually see that every school in this country tries to provide the right kind of learning environment for children, irrespective of where they're living and where they are coming from. And on the language, we have said about the medium of instruction being in mother tongue, again an evidence-based kind of a recommendation, and that is not to reduce the preeminence of English. But let me also say, while I mention this particular recommendation and any recommendation related to schools, that schools are largely managed by the state governments. And the government of India's role can only be of an advisory nature. And particularly with the recommendation for language, we are very much aware of the fact that when we say mother tongue or local language or home language, the complexity of the availability of teachers would be a very major challenge. And therefore, the state governments may have to take a call, but learning a subject in the mother tongue will actually promote cognitive development of the child. And it does not mean that the child may have to continue to learn in that medium of instruction. The child will be learning English along with other languages. And subsequently, when the child transits from the grade 5 into another medium, we do not see a difference because the child has already developed a certain degree of cognitive ability to understand that, plus has the language ability, and the two combined together should see a seamless transition when the child moves from grade 5 into other mediums of instruction. But as a general principle, this policy has stressed upon multilingualism. In a country like India, I don't think we need to have a colonial hangover of merely being able to communicate in English and determine that my ability to communicate in English determines my level of information or knowledge. That is absolutely a fallacious argument. And therefore, the person's ability to speak in one's own regional language or one's own language and communicate the same thing in a very effective manner, which means that this person has understood that particular subject, is something that this policy seeks to emphasize upon without trying to impose any specific language, without trying to say that one language is superior to the other. Now, on the school governance, we have only tried to base ourselves on a principle, two things. One, that public schools and private schools will be governed by the same set of norms. What should be the pupil-teacher ratio? What should be the classroom size and the physical space of a classroom to the number of students? These norms will be uniform for public and private schools, government and private schools. At the same time, we have said that the combination of operations, of regulation, of standards and accreditation in one body, which is the Department of School Education and the Directorate of School Education, is not a healthy one. And therefore, we have said that Department of School Education in the states can be the overseeing body, which is the oversight, but the operations will be done by the Directorate of the School Education and a new body, that is the State School Standards Authority, which will lay down the standards, but which will be regulated not by them, but would be regulated by the Department of School Education, and the SCRT creating academic standards with a school quality assessment and accreditation framework. At this point, I think I may have missed out on the board examinations. We are talking about creating a new body called PARAK, which is nothing like but an National Assessment Center. It is not going to take away the powers of any school boards. Let me clarify that. All school boards that we have, about 40 or 50 that we have, and the CBSE, and so also the ICSE, they will continue to be there as they are. But all that the body will be trying to do would be trying to say that if there is a core curriculum that we have, and you have to have the kind of assessment to align with the new 5+3+3+4, how do we do this in the most judicious manner for assessing the students in the right way, and not to take away the power of the existing school boards which are already conducting the examinations. And we are moving away from summative assessment to formative assessment to holistic assessment. And this is where the new body will try to work in sync with all other boards of assessment. I think this gives you a gamut of what we are talking about and the reforms that will come about in the teacher education, so that teachers are geared to this new task and they are the ones who will be the drivers of the change. But I think I'll stop here and allow other aspects to evolve as the discussion goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful putting out of the outlay of this decoding of NEP 2020. I am also reminded when you were talking and when you were concluding about the teachers, last day in the Prime Minister's address, as you said rightly, like an educationist, he has put the NEP into a nutshell, and it has reached the heart of people. And of course, we as educators always wanted this change to come in. I personally believed that 360-degree report card is a must, because I always feel that personally, I was not I was academically good, but it doesn't mean that I was a topper all the time. But the life skills, the things which you learned in your lifetime are the ones which you have made you to be successful in your life. So these, and as he has rightly put, the mark sheets which nowadays is presented to the student, or it's parents take it as a mark prestige sheet and students take it as a mark pressure sheet when you talk about the marks. And when the Prime Minister was pointing out, many of the teachers were thinking, no, there was a time when we used to say Mata Pita Guru Devam. Now it has become Mata Pita Google and Devam. So it is whether the teacher is losing her importance. But as pointed out by the Prime Minister in his right talk, was that an aeroplane, how much the progress would have been made in the advancement of the technology and how the flight is, but it needs a pilot to run the thing. So you also concluded that the teacher empowerment and teachers to train, and teachers are the people who have to take this national education policy, because school education depends upon the drastic change in the attitude of teachers. So I was so happy and impressed the way you have presented it, and many of the doubts I think have already been cleared. But then there are panelists today who are going to, they are here with some of the queries which they have in their mind. May I request the General Secretary, Confederation of Kerala Sahodaya Complexes, Mr. Francis K.A., the Principal of Naipunya Public School. Sir, please, you can put across your queries and discuss with.
Very good morning to all of you. Respected Shakila ma'am, who has elaborately dealt with the main aspects of this new education policy. My colleagues, Dr. Deepa Chandran, Dr. Binu Mohan, Dr. George Kolanjeri, Mr. T. Prem Kumar, Mr. Prasid Prasad, Mr. Paul, and the other members of Password Publication who have taken up this initiative of conducting such a webinar, which would throw light into various aspects of this new education policy. In fact, when we go deep into these various levels and aspects of education policy, which has been improvised now and also has given a new outlook to the education scenario, we find a lot of things very promising, and there is always a chance for a change. As it was rightly said, the concept about education is going to be changed for a holistic learning and a holistic report card, which is a welcome thing, which would be bringing a kind of passport to the individuals or students who come out of the schools. They will be, I mean, that would be their identity. We will be, I mean, the different bodies, different interviews and other examining system will be able to analyze the student by seeing such a comprehensive report card. That is a welcome thing. And also, many of the things highlighted in this document is having a very wide and outlook on the matter, and also there is a far-sightedness in it. I also have a little bit of apprehension about certain things which I would like to share. In a way, it is not apprehension. In fact, it's a kind of, we were in a comfort zone so far, the system which was prevailing, and a shift from that would definitely create a kind of little, unrest. And also there can be kind of oppositions or objections or comments and criticism just because a change is being introduced. Ma'am, you have touched upon almost all the points which we have in our mind, what would be and how it would be. Still, for the clarity's sake, I would like to highlight certain points which I would request you to throw light on. One thing which is, we have there is a structural difference in the setup which is going to come. Along with that, what would be the functional difference? See, now we have, as you have rightly said, there are almost 50 boards existing. And we have different boards like CBSE, ICSE, state syllabus. See, in the scenario of India, with the varied population, with the different languages and all that, see, different cultures, see, all these boards will have their own identity at present in a different way. There is no synchronization taking place at present. Now, as per this new education policy, there is every room for a synchronization. And how far it is going to be effective in the way functional, I mean, how it would be in different boards and how they would synchronize, what would happen. I think I would put all my queries together so that this time can be saved. Man can just note off it and can elaborate on it. Another thing which I wanted to say, there is a uniform syllabus and a unified syllabus. And this syllabus of different boards have their quality levels at different level. We have, just for example's sake, I would say, we have a state board, we have a CBSE board, ICSE board. You see, in all these different boards, we find there is a variation in the quality level or the standard of education in different. So how are we going to address that issue in this new education policy? The third thing which I would say, will there be a universal acceptability of the scheme and syllabus which is going to be introduced? Because as I noticed, see, a few years back, the CBSE has come up. They had come up with this, what do you call, CCE scheme. As you have rightly said, we are focusing on formative assessment. And the gist, the cult, everything was based on that. CC itself was a formative assessment. Unfortunately, halfway we had to drop it. Another thing, even when the CC was introduced, it was said that all the boards in the country, they had a body, and that body has accepted it and would be approved and would be accommodating it in all their states. But unfortunately, what we have experienced in us as a principal, what I could notice, see, our students who studied in CBSE system, with their report card when they went for admission in state syllabus schools, or when they went for admission in polytechnic, there was a stepmotherly treatment. There was so much of discrimination based on the examination pattern followed in different boards. Will this sort of a thing is going to happen again when we are going for a new education policy? That is a very, that is an apprehensive area we are very much concerned about. Another thing, see, in the education policy, lot of do's and don'ts are said.
If I may
Yes.
interrupt you, I think
Yes,
I'll
ma'am.
answer the first 3 questions and take up the others later, because
Yeah.
it is possible that I'll lose track of the questions
Okay,
that
ma'am.
you had asked.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah.
So let me first clarify that this policy is against uniformization, if I may use a word like that. It is not talking of uniformization. What it is talking about is a kind of a rationalization and an integrated curriculum. See, the subject of education is in the concurrent list, and it is not something which the government of India can dictate. All that it can say is that this is the new way in which we need to look at education, because in the current scenario, many of us as teachers need to hang our heads in shame that they have come out of an education system after being there for about 20 odd years with a piece of paper which has no value in the employment market. Who is responsible for that? It's the system. The system has not adapted itself to the changes that take place. We are very comfortable in the way we have been used to teaching something. But the current challenges of a 21st century require children to have a different focus. You see, when someone read my CV, said 39 years, academic years of service. That is because we could remain in a similar kind of a profession for so long. With artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and the absolute onslaught of technology, you cannot go on giving children that kind of knowledge or information which is going to be obsolete or which is going to be outdated even as we finish speaking a particular sentence, the speed and the dynamism with which it is. And therefore, the need to have the 21st century skills where children have good communication skills, collaborative learning, critical thinking, cognitive abilities, and to be able to work with teamwork, adaptability, handling stress, and changing themselves for jobs which we are not even able to predict. So we are not uniformizing anything. There is not going to be a common syllabus that all state boards and CBSE and ICSE is going to follow. We have clearly said that the textbooks also will be having the local context, and children relate best to their local context. So this whole idea that we are going to have a synchronization where in India everything is going to look alike is absolutely fallacious, because they will continue to be the manner where they are. It is the approach in which the teacher will be teaching a particular subject. And as I said, the 5+3+3+4 is more in the functions of flexibility of curricula. It is not structural. It is more in the functions of the flexibility of curricula, the manner in which the teaching learning will move away from rote-based, memory-based learning, where there is no assimilation of knowledge, no ability of the child to apply that knowledge, and merely regurgitating what the child has has merely memorized from a textbook onto an examination paper and testing that child on that paper with that marks. That is what are the changes that are going to happen. The function of the teacher, the function of an educational institution, and the function of educational administrators who head these educational institutions to bring about this transformative change in the functionality of that approach to curricula, teaching, learning, and therefore the assessment. These three are not separate. These three are part of an entire learning process, with the learner being at the center and the learner being empowered for the 21st century skills. So we are not trying to say that all these boards will go and there will be only one board and all boards will look alike and we all will be wearing a similar uniform and this is what we'll be teaching, this is how the calendar is going to be. Absolutely wrong. There is no such an effort at all. And the curriculum is not unified. It is an integrated curriculum. Let us understand that. If you're talking of holistic learning, you have to integrate curricula and make children understand that knowledge is a permeable thing. And there are linkages between social sciences and sciences. There are linkages between language and music. There are linkages between music and mathematics. There are linkages between all aspects that go to make up an individual. And rather than create a hierarchy of disciplines, rather than trying to say that one is superior to the other, and where today teachers of sciences do not like to look at teachers of social sciences. We as teachers, and I say that because I come from the teaching fraternity, have created so many silos that we have finally created an incompetent set of students who are not able to appreciate and understand the interlinkages between the subjects. And I think this is the change that we are wanting to bring about, and we should be able to do that, because the most resistant community to change is the teaching fraternity. And it is this fraternity that we have been holding the conclave from 5th of September to the 28th of September, where series of webcasts are going on. And I would urge all of you who are here, gathered here today, to look at the beautiful presentations that talked about art integrated pedagogy, about joy related pedagogy, about the kind of toy related pedagogy, the holistic progress card where self-assessment, peer assessment, teacher assessment, and even parent assessment go to making into the holistic progress card. I urge you, the webcast is there. It is there on the ministry site. And I'd urge each one of you to look at all these presentations, even particularly on the work that is already being done. It is not that we are trying to say something is going to come from the top and suddenly fall. Some work is already being done. The sharing of the best practices has been done. But we need to move from our current mindset. And as Deepa rightly gathered, it is the attitudinal change in the teacher and bringing about that attitudinal change through advocacy in the parents, in the community, to understand that unless we move towards this learning paradigm, that we are saying we are blessed with a demographic dividend, if by 2040 also students are going to learn the way they are learning today, let us be sure that this is not a demographic dividend, but a demographic disaster. Unless they learn these kind of new skills and new attitudes and new knowledge areas, and the permeability of all these knowledge areas. Because as we said, the jobs of tomorrow are even unknown and unpredicted. And therefore the teaching learning, the functionality of that, the curricular approach, which the curriculum framework will bring about, it will only lay down the broad outlines. It is not going to say that everybody will be wearing a blue shirt and a black pant like a uniform. That is not what the national curriculum framework will bring about. Every school will have the autonomy to work within that framework, but it will not be allowed to follow the structured system which is currently being there. That is the change or the shift. I think I've addressed all the three, and for paucity of time with other persons, please go ahead with that.
Yeah. See, one more thing which I would like to bring about, that is, so we have, we'll be in the policy document, there will be a lot of things to be, what should be done, how it should, I mean, what are things not to be done, all that is there. And on one side, see, we say that both private and public sector schools should merge, or rather work together, and sharing of resources and things like that. So then, I mean, thinking in the financial side of it, see, on one side, the public sector schools are provided, funded by the government, and the private sector schools by individuals. So we have in Kerala, there are about 1,500 CBSE schools which are run by private organizations. So they spend money, they build the infrastructure, everything, the manpower, everything is provided, but there is no support. Only the government is there to say, don't do that, don't do this, this should be done like this and all that. Now, there is always that financial viability, the question of financial viability that comes up. And then, see, if there is a policy which is to take care of everyone in the similar manner, there should be a way of funding even the private sector schools in some way or other, rather than saying that you manage everything like that, but it should be like this. This is one thing which I have a concern about. Another thing is, I mean, see, presently we are following different types of textbooks. There are private published books are there, and the government publication is there, NCERT books are there. But what would be the thinking of the new education policy about this sort of, you have rightly said that there is always that room for, different way of thinking and different approach to things. Even in the case of textbooks, I believe if there is any norm prescribed for that with regard to the textbooks, that is one thing. And regarding it was already addressed by you that the Malayalam or rather the vernacular teaching, my one concern, how it is going to help in the employability of candidates, especially when we are having different language structure. We have a linguistic state system in our democracy, and as we say that certain things are in the central government list, certain things are in the state government list. All these bifurcations are there, and later on we say that okay, if moving out or moving from one state to another, will that in search of job, will it be affecting a system where only the vernacular or the local language is stressed much in the lower levels? That is then another point which I would like to ask is about vocational education. We have already a system in our country, like the vocational education schools, vocational higher secondary is there. There is a polytechnics, ITCs. Now all these are on the verge of a close down because the students are not there. So now what would be the situation when we are focusing much on this vocational education? Will it be creating a kind of professional division in the society or something like that? These are all mere concerns which I would like to put before you, and if you could answer, it would be nice.
Yeah, on the first one, let us be very clear. Public and private schools will be governed by the same set of norms. But it does not mean that the government of India is going to use the taxpayers' money to fund private schools. That is very, very clear. You have private higher education institutions also. And private institutions, you all take CBSE affiliation to follow a certain standard, but funding would not come from the government of India or by the state government. All that it might do would be creating enabling mechanisms by which you may be able to raise revenue and so on. But when we talked about a school complex, not included the private schools as being part of the school complex by this very attitude that we knew that we would have resistance from the private schools, that the private schools would feel that their resources are being used by the poor Indian students and therefore that they should not be catered to. So we have created a divide in our society where we believe that the private should flourish on their own and therefore the poor government schools or students coming from government schools should be left to fend for themselves. So the government will always think of funding only the public schools and the government aided schools, and I don't think CBSE are all pure private schools, but they are aided schools, if I understand it right. So if we are talking of the school complex, yes please.
CBSE schools are not aided schools. It is private schools only.
No, we have a lot of CBSE aided schools. We have a lot of CBSE aided schools. No, NEP and Navodaya are pure government schools, but there are CBSE government aided schools. There are CBSE aided schools. I know that.
Anyway,
there are
in Kerala, there is no schools.
It's only the affiliation to the board that you have taken. There are CBSE schools which are other than the Kendriya Vidyalaya and the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalaya also. There are government aided CBSE schools also. May not be so true maybe in Kerala, but across the country, and Kerala does not really represent the whole country, but there are a lot of CBSE aided schools across the country.
Francis,
but
sir,
as far as the public funded, as far as the school complex is concerned, it will only be government and government aided schools. No private schools would be part of the school complex for sharing the resources and for sharing the infrastructure. Though ideally, in the committee, when we had discussed it, we wanted that because it would have said that we would have moving away from what is mine and what is yours to something like what is ours. But that mindset will not change as much as this discussion is currently reflected also. Now, coming to the other issue on the vocational education, if you only create engineers and you don't create people who are supposed to be the skill force, you have a lopsided economic development. And I don't think education is for an end in itself. Education is a means to an end to not only individual empowerment and social good, but also for the economic growth of the country. And it is unfortunate that we have created a hierarchy where we feel ashamed if my son or my daughter is only a plumber or an electrician, and we take great pride in saying that my son is an electrical engineer or is a civil engineer. That mindset needs to change. All forms of work have got their own dignity. And unless we as teachers and educational institutions change this, and as policymakers, we have tried to bring about that change to say that these silos need to disappear. On the textbooks, you have NCERT textbooks, you have state councils for educational research and tiered training who are free to adapt that. You have private publishers like the one Password itself says that they create some publications. But all this should be contextualized. You cannot have a kind of example from the Northeast which applies to, let us say, Jammu and Kashmir, or something that is there in Maharashtra that might apply to Kerala. Textbooks will always have to be in the local context. And therefore, there is no attempt. We will only say that there are, the NCERT brings out an NCFSC, and with the basis of this NCFSC, we will have the NCERT textbooks. And it is left to the states how best they would like to adapt this by introducing the local context and then bringing it in the manner that they feel that the students will be able to understand and learn better. So I think that apprehension also should not be there. At the same time, I think the thrust of all your questions, if I may sort of capture all of it together, is to shift ourselves from actually saying what may be comfortable for a teaching institution with the current scenario to move, because we have to change and adapt to the kind of new scenario. This policy actually said someone who is joining at the age 3, when coming out in 2040 from an entire education trajectory, both school and higher together, should be able to meet with the challenges that that economy and the society puts up then, not the current one. The current one, yes. Therefore, that gradual shift and all this implementation, let me tell you, this ministry will bring out guidelines. First, they will discuss with the state governments. They'll bring out guidelines, and then where they will actually try to work it out with all those who are the implementers. And right now, this conclave is actually being targeted for the last teacher in this country. Every teacher should be sensitized to these changes, because they are going to be the change makers along with the parents. And you all will be, as educational institutions and administrators, driving that forward so that the entire scenario, and I think I missed out on your language part of it. You see, merely knowing the knowledge of English in a very multilingual country like ours is desirable, no doubt. But we must be able to harness the ability of the child to pick up multiple languages, because it is related to multiple intelligences. It is related to cognitive development. And the ability to, acquire a language proficiency, but become familiar with the way language facilitates the development of a particular understanding of a particular subject. These two nuances must be distinguished. And we should therefore empower our children, not only just for the regional language, but for English and for any other language, but also create the kind of, let us say, the mental ability or the cognitive development for that child to be able to pick up languages as per the necessity. And this is already evident today. It is not that it is not being done. I don't think all our children go around only speaking English. They speak a number of languages, and I'm sure all these languages will have its own strength, and we should be able to build upon that. So the whole idea is to promote all languages, and we will be moving away. I don't think the Chinese feel ashamed to say that they would speak in Chinese, or the Japanese feel ashamed to say that they will speak in Japanese. So why should we feel ashamed if I can say that I can speak in Malayalam? I think we should understand that the richness of all languages is significant. And India is not only speaking English across its diverse population. Mind you, language has a close correlation with the culture of a particular area and a particular society. It deals with the traditions. And therefore, knowledge of the language. I had put out a WhatsApp post which had so many likes that if I feel ashamed to talk to my child in my mother tongue, then I am actually depriving that child of understanding the connect that the child has with the previous generations. And I think we are doing a great disservice by overemphasizing the importance of English and not understanding the importance of all our mother tongues and our regional languages. I think I'll rest my case over here and go on for the further discussion.
Thank you, ma'am. There is a query from people who are watching. The question is, when we are allowing our students to change their own areas of studies, can we guarantee that they would get good career opportunities related to that particular discipline of studies? Because
if I understood you rightly, Deepa, I think the concern that is coming in is that when we allow
the chat box, some of them are asking if we have a basket of areas of studies which we have it in the higher secondary level, and whether when they come out, whether the career opportunities will be related to their particular discipline of study. That is what they are asking.
I put a counter question to that. How many of us actually became bank managers or became, let us say, in a IT company because of the subject we have studied? Currently, the disconnect between what is learned and the work, and in another panel discussion where you had a member of the Kerala Public Service Commission, he said that for a post of an assistant, 80% of the applicants were engineers.
Yes.
What is our engineering education? Let us try to introspect and understand that currently also merely learning a particular subject has not transited them directly into the world of work. And what we are trying to say is that you are moving into a knowledge domain where there is a lot of connect between different courses: sciences, mathematics, life sciences, social sciences, language, sports, music, performing arts, pharmacy, agriculture, all of it. They are all actually contributing to the understanding and the talent of the child. Currently, we as parents, we as teachers have made rigid choices for our children. We have destroyed the autonomy of the child under the garb of saying that the child does not understand all these things. And therefore, I will make the decisions for the child. And I will decide what that child will learn. Have we tried to understand what their aptitude or their talent is? And even if they had an aptitude or a talent in a particular area, we seem to destroy that by trying to say that, no, I would like to see you as either a doctor or as an engineer and not take up any other profession. Look around us. Let us broaden our vision and see what are the jobs that are around. So by giving children multiple curricular choices, by understanding that the core areas of science, mathematics, and social sciences and languages will be there, also allow them to take up vocational crafts, also allow them to learn multiple languages. If they want a sport, let them pursue that. If they want to dance, let them allow that career in dance or music. Why do we see television shows of child idols? Killing the creativity of the child because you would like to do that at that age, but if it were to become something that the child would like to pursue as a career, it would be shameful for the parent or for the educational institution, which only runs to say that our school had 100% results in the academic area. We need to shift from that. And it is making the child perceive. The child does not have these concerns. We teachers have those concerns. It is not the child that has put that query to you. It is the teacher who has put that query, that are we then relating it? And currently also, the kind of connect that is particularly in higher education, where the connect between what is learned and what is actually being done on ground as a job that the person takes is quite disconnected. We should be able to sensitize the child that these are the various options. And these are the areas, if you have talent and if you have a potential, that is where the uniqueness of every child comes about. And I think that is a very significant attitudinal change that we may have to actually accept, because that is the reality of tomorrow. Coding, we would like children to start learning very young, because coding will then make that child deal with kind of programmings that may be required later on in life. The child may like music along with that. One of our own committee members, whom you are all familiar with, Manjur Bhagwan, is an authority of music and maths. And he has proven evidence to say mathematical problems where he was struggling got solved with half an hour of musical contribution that he was able to do, because it opened up the way the brain was mapped. The mapping, the neurons in the brains get changed. So let us not just use about a fraction of the brain, which is a well of treasure, and use all those capacities and multiple intelligences that children have. And that's why I once again urge you all to see those webcasts where we talk about toy integrated learning and art integrated learning, where even for children with disabilities, how they are made to feel that their own abilities to comprehend without being stratified or without being segregated as no-gooders actually allow them to, they're mainstreamed along with the regular children. That, I think, is something I would urge all of you all to really have a look at those webcasts.
Yes, ma'am, you have rightly pointed out, as you know, the 21st century skills that foresee critical, creative, collaborative, arising the curiosity, then communicative, and of course, along with that, 2 additional C's of what you call it as citizenship and character. All these things have to be built up by the teachers and by the faculties and by the stakeholders, parents, all together for children. And as you said rightly, the new age of learning is stressing on this 5 E's also, that is engage, explore, experience, express, and excel. Let us do that for our children. Now, moving on to the next person, Binimon sir, you can put across your queries, but I would request all the moderates to be very specific, because we are running out of time. And madam, thank you for, I mean, on time and being with us now. Just Binimon sir, can you please take it up, your query?
Yeah, ma'am, thank you. Honorable Speaker of the Day, Dr. Shakila ma'am, and all eminent panelists. Indeed, a pleasure for me to be a part of this program and sharing the platform with eminent speakers and the principals across the country. Ma'am, actually you beautifully comprehend almost all the points regarding National Education Policy 2020, because I took a lot of efforts and time to just went through the entire pages of National Education Policy, and all the aspects very clearly you summed up. There are some types of apprehensions among the minds of the principals across the country when we are participating and discussing about national education policies, webinars, and formal and informal discussions. And one important aspect is about the subject choice. There will be no hard separation across subjects in school education. There is no separation between curricular, co-curricular, or science or mathematics or any other subjects. It's an opportunity, the basket of choice for the children. But the problem is, as far as the principal is concerned, when it comes to the secondary or higher secondary level, it creates a problem for the principal as a decision maker, or the school as an administrator. It will take an administrative problem will be there. Finding out of teachers also very difficult. For example, a student would like to choose a particular subject that is beyond the capacity of a school. The school has to find out a particular teacher for that. It's basically, it's a minute and micro issue, but it's a big issue as far as a small school is concerned. That is one thing. Another idea is about the vocational education. Vocational education is a very beautiful concept, and Francis rightly mentioned that it's already prevailing. And whether it is effective or not, we don't know exactly. Mahatma Gandhi also envisaged a beautiful vocational education, and it's structured very well. It was going on also. And something happened to the vocational education in between. Most of the government schools dropped this program. But again, vocational education is emerged in this particular national education policy and giving more significance, so that's very good. But at the same time, when we consider socially disadvantaged groups, when we give an opportunity for them or acquaintance with them to vocational courses, will there be a possibility of discontinuation of their course in between? Because they are sometimes if they are poverty ridden, they are even not affordable to their school fees or even food expenses and all. If they are getting a vocational course in their early stages of education, will there be an opportunity for them to discontinue the course and pursue the same vocational course which they are started doing? That is actually some micro question, but it's an apprehension among the principals. And one more thing is, all efforts will be made in preparing high quality bilingual textbooks and teaching learning materials for science and mathematics. So that is also given in the NEP document. So prepare bilingual textbook in which way, the mode of preparation. Can you give some ideas about this, in which way it should come up? So that's also a doubt and apprehension among us. A bilingual textbook, at the same time, bilateral agreement between the states for hiring teachers to teach local language or training languages. So there is an ample provision for interaction between the teachers, especially as far as language is concerned. They can move in between states, they can learn so many languages. So in that area, how this bilateral agreement would happen, and which authority will be done all these things, and whether it is possible and whether it is applicable for the private schools also. As far as government, can you just give some ideas related to this area, assessment area? These are the main areas. All other areas you beautifully summed up and cleared, and we are happy about that. If it is possible, kindly give a few informations regarding all these aspects about assessment and teacher quality assessment, and then bilingual textbooks and bilateral agreement between the states for hiring teachers, especially language teachers. Thank you, ma'am.
So the NPST is something which has been a long contemplated reform, where we need to have benchmarks each level of teaching, and teachers need to reach that level of professional standards. So benchmarks for, let us say, early childcare education, benchmarks for maybe the preparatory stage, then the middle stage and the secondary, because we would now, NPST would be aligned with the new 4 stage that we are talking about. The idea is that this is only being aligned to the kind of, let us say, the manner in which the teaching, learning and the assessment needs to take place, and that teachers would acquire certain minimum standards which have to be defined. We haven't created the NPST as of now. We will first have the NCF coming out, the parallel exercise of the early childcare and pedagogical framework that will go in parallel. It is only when the NCF SC and the NCF, the ECE related NCF comes out, then we will work on the NCF TE. And once the NCF TE comes in, within that, we would like to embed this idea of national professional standards for teachers. So the NPST and the NCF TE will happen in parallel, in keeping with the changes that we look at in the curricular approach, the teaching, learning, and the assessment for the levels that would be outlined in the National Curricular and Pedagogical Framework for ECE and NCF SC for school education across all those 4 stages. Now, this is something which we are going to initiate now. It is not there right now, but the theory of actually advocating NPST is that we need to have some benchmarks by which, if teachers who have joined as, let us say, teaching in early childhood care education, when acquiring maybe additional qualifications or reaching certain standards, can go on to move up in their career, up to going to teach at class 12. This is a career progression we have charted out, by which currently, where a teacher who joins at a certain stage, or let us say primary school or secondary school that we use in our other current nomenclature, or higher secondary, there is no change that is possible for someone who started at the primary to go to the secondary, or from the secondary to go to the higher secondary in the current structure. In this structure that we are talking about, the 5+3+3+4, there is a progression that we envisage. And this progression is by acquiring the kind of standards that each teacher would have. There will be guidelines for their promotion. That is, of course, another aspect of it. But the teacher recruitment itself will not just be on the basis of the qualification, but also by interviews and by demonstration, because we would like to actually see a proven track record for a teacher to demonstrate that the teacher can teach well in the class. That has also been listed. We drew a lot of flack in the feedback, but we stuck to our guns and have put that into the NEP 2020. Now, on the aspect of the bilingual textbooks, we have already got a lot of rich institutions who can do that. There are language institutions, there are university departments. See, what happens is we tend to look at only those bodies which are there in the ambit of the school education. We do not think of a linkage between the school and the higher education departments at all. And this is the synergy that we would like to see. As I said, this policy looks at education in a continuum, not only from the learning trajectory, but also in terms of the interconnectedness that needs to come about between the school and the higher, and leverage academies that are there in the so-called domain of higher education to actually start helping us out for preparation of bilingual textbooks. We are talking about an Indian Institute of Translation and Interpretation. These would be some of the bodies with existing bodies, like you already have of the SCRTs and colleges for teacher education, language academies that are there. They all need to work together. It is not that this is not my business at all and this is somebody else's business and they will take care of it. The fact is, as I said, let's move away from I and me to we and ours and work together in trying to make it happen. But you will have guidelines coming out from the state governments to actually do that. It is not, it seems impossible, but unless you walk through that journey yourself, we will not be able to find out solutions. You will have to take that track. You will always have to take that hard track to do that. Now, on the choice, that the micro question that you were asking, whether schools would have teachers to teach in all the subjects. Yes, I think it is like this. I think each school will have to finally assess which are those subjects. We cannot, you can't say that there will be 500 courses and all these courses we will have teachers, or if we don't have those teachers, we will get them from somewhere and ask them to teach. A school will have to assess which are the current extracurricular and co-curricular subjects that you currently have. You have the resources for that, the playgrounds for that, the laboratories that are needed for that, where if you have these, then instead of demarcating, the child will have this facility to take maybe proper curricular subjects that we normally understand as sciences and social sciences and so on, but also have some sports, also have some performing arts and any other areas. But we have tried to say, let us try to introduce agriculture. It is very shameful to say, if you talk to students from where I come from in Bombay and Delhi, people will tell you that an apple will come from Big Basket or from some other shop. They do not know that an apple is actually grown. That is the level of ignorance that an agrarian country like ours has created in youngsters who do not even understand the value of the earth, the soil, and what is being planted and what finally comes on their plate, on the table, dining table, the kind of labor that farmers put into that. Shouldn't children in the schools understand the phenomenon of farmer suicides? Then only you will understand and sensitize them. Let them learn with their senses. We are shutting them out of all these kind of, and I'm sorry when I speak that with a passion, but I say that we have not done that ability, but what you can teach in the micro level would depend on the resources. On the bilateral agreements, this would be something where the states may have to take a call. We had a wonderful, I had chaired the session on language because that is the most emotive topic. And we had this one teacher who came from Jharkhand, and she was saying about the multilingual dictionary with pictograms and how teachers were actually trained to use these kind of, yes, the capacity building of teachers to do that would be important. But Jharkhand and Odisha came together to address the language issues of tribal children in these areas. And mind you, these children are living in what we call are the left-wing extremist affected districts, highly infested with a lot of extremism activities going on in these places. If those places could deal with that, let us try to think, what are the other issues? Let us try to actually see if there are teaching resources that are available to teach in other languages. Can these all, let us not just even wait for bilateral agreements between state governments. Let us start looking at the whole fraternity of schools who are assembled today, which are those areas in which we can share those resources, and whether we can have some working arrangements so that we may be able to offer these. So I don't think I have left out any of your questions, but this is my take and how the policy or the committee or the ministry is currently thinking about it. But wait for all these in the implementation, because the timelines for that, as I said, would vary between coming 21-22, where the Prime Minister said the new curriculum will come into force, to 2030, which would be the 10 years period by which all these changes would come into existence.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, madam. As you have rightly stressed that, the integrating of subjects, the learning should happen by integrating all, because maybe you have concentrated being a biologist, but then you need economics in your lifetime. You need a lot of subjects related to you when you come out. So it is in the real life situation that how we make the child integrate in our classrooms, which makes the graph go higher. Now we have Mr. Prem Kumar sir, who is from the Middle East. Sir, it's your turn. Prem Kumar sir is there?
Yes, I'm very much here.
Yes, sir. So you are welcome to have the interaction.
Yeah. Honorable Speaker of the Day, Madam Shakila, respected Dr. Deepa, Mr. Binu. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm still in the morning here in Kuwait. I'm indeed enlightened to the core with the discussion that I've been witnessing over now almost an hour and a half. I think Madam has really explained each and every aspect of NEP 2020, as she has been a part and parcel of framing this policy decision. But Madam, I just have a couple of very simple questions, and I've been pondering over this for a very, very long time. One of the main concerns that today the schools are facing, at least I should say in the Middle East, we have about 220 schools, CBSE schools. And the main concern is about the quality of teachers. I was not a teacher. I was a research scholar with Baba Atomic Research Center, Anushakti Nagar, Bombay, Trombay. But while sitting inside my research lab one day, I realized that I had my teacher education from one of the finest colleges in our country. And we have just 4 such colleges. One in Mysore. Ma'am, I think you know the Regional Institute of Education, Mysore. The second one is in Bhopal, and the one in Bhubaneswar, one in Ajmer. Madam, I'm aware when I was a student of this institute where I did my graduation and post-graduation, and I was paid by the government, by the NCERT scholarship. That's what turned my life today to be a principal sitting here now. That these institutes were created in the country long, long back. And Madam, you will know for sure, I'm not sure about the other participants, but Madam, you will know for sure that this particular college produces the finest of teachers, because the professors there are 100% dedicated professors, 24/7. At least the time that I spent in the college, I know for sure. And my professors are part of the NCERT book framing as well. Now, Madam, my concern from then to now is the government of India has been talking a lot about setting up IITs and MBBS colleges, etc., from their side. But I've never heard, maybe I'm an ignorant person, Government of India talking about setting up more RIEs. There's one coming up in Andhra Pradesh very soon. I know that, the fifth one. But it is high time that government invested money in making quality teacher education colleges with integrated course. Madam, I did an integrated BSc. You know that, right? I don't have to explain to you my course structure. That is why sitting in the lab one day in Bombay, I realized that I'm not fit for doing any research and becoming somebody in my life. Rather, I go back to a school and produce doctors, PhDs in physics, chemistry, mathematics, or whatever engineering that they like, because I've been trained to produce such individuals. So I quit without anyone's permission, that is my family people, and I took up teaching in the Middle East. So my humble query is, why hasn't our government not invested in setting up quality teacher education centers in the country? That's point number one. My second point is there's a lot about the examination at the end of grade 3, grade 5, and grade 8. I read the 65-page NEP. I've been attending quite a few decoding national education policies, but I have not heard anyone specify who conducts these standardized tests at the level of 3, 5, and 8, and how this will be done. And that is my second. And my last query is, the textbooks come into picture only from grade 3 and above. And you did mention, ma'am, that there will be unified, or there will be a structured curriculum from that foundation course of 5 years. Now, who decides that, and when will that come into force? Because in the Middle East now, there's a lot of discussion going on about following next year onwards, the 3 pre-primary, that is the foundation course, and then grade 1 and 2, the 5 years, they are planning now here. But that plan of Kuwait may not be applicable in Oman, in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. So don't you think, madam, that the people at the helm of affairs of NEP should come out and say, we are going to give to all the schools a structured framework, and then you start implementing it. Otherwise, again, there's going to be a lot of variations. These are my 3 simple questions, ma'am, and I request you to kindly enlighten me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Prem Kumar. And I missed out congratulating both Dr. Deepa and Dr. Prem Kumar, who are National Teacher Awardees in different points of time.
Yes.
And on the 3 questions that you have raised, on the standalone teacher education institutions which are offering the 2-year B.Ed program, we are already aware of the significant damage it has done to this country. And we have taken a stand, and you know that there has been a Justice Verma committee report which closed down as many as about 120 to 180 teaching institutions in Maharashtra, where the principle was that first, the teacher education is a part of higher education, which we have tried to do. Second, that teacher education cannot take place in an isolated manner. It has to be in an integrated multidisciplinary environment, and therefore it has to be an integrated program like the RIEs have been offering from ages on, and that this is the model to go forward. We have, of course, said that the integrated B.Ed program is already, because I was a nodal officer for the National Mission on Teachers and Teaching, we have the Central University setting up schools of education which offer the 4 integrated program. Some state governments have come out with their own institutions which have set that up. And let me also be clear that we will not have in higher education, even IITs and IIMs being single discipline institutions. They will all be moving towards what we call as a liberal arts multidisciplinary education, or what we use the nomenclature in the NEP 2020 document, that is the holistic multidisciplinary education. But what we used in the committee report is the liberal arts education, which will look at all disciplines being allowed, just as we done away with the curricular structural barriers that we have in school, same way in the higher education. So teacher education, the investment is already taking place in the centrally funded institutions. We cannot impose it upon the state institutions, but you have examples like the MS University in Baroda, the Jadavpur one, the one in Calcutta, the Presidency College. There are a number of examples, and maybe so in the South also. Pardon my not being able to give you examples of that. Other than the 4 RIs, the central universities and some state universities are already offering the 4-year integrated program in a multidisciplinary environment. And we hope that by 2030, we will have only the 4-year integrated program at the B.Ed level, and that wherever there are standalone, currently it will go parallelly, both together, the 2-year and the 4-year. Gradually, we will only have the 4-year, and any standalone B.Ed college, if they cannot move to become a part of the multidisciplinary college environment, will be forced to shut down. You know that in a country like India, it is very difficult to shut down unless there is a judicial intervention, just like the Justice Verma Committee did. That was a case in the court, and therefore there was an imposition, and therefore they were forced to shut down. But without trying to take the legal recourse, we are hopeful that the regulatory system will be able to handle that. Now, coming to the quality of teachers, it is as much a concern for each and every stakeholder in this country, because teaching is the importance of teaching as a profession itself has not been understood. And that is why this policy says it would like to restore the dignity of the teacher, the guru, as we once looked at. But if the guru is someone who is only looking at a 9-to-5 job and an income generating activity without a passion and a connect to the students, then that teacher will not be able to deliver. So to look at teaching not as just a work, but cannot be altruistic. We want good service conditions. We don't want teacher transfers in a manner that it takes place. We don't want teachers to be loaded with activities which prevent them to move away from their academic core activities. All these we have tried to weave it together to actually bring about the centrality of the teacher, restore the dignity of the teacher, give them good service conditions, allow them to grow, and provide for continuous training. The most significant aspect is to look at the training and the retraining, and if I may say so, even make our teachers unlearn what they have come from in a very structured environment to move towards an unstructured way of teaching and learning. In fact, I think I wanted to make myself clear to reiterate that it is not to move towards structuring things. In fact, the ages between 3 to 8, we did not want any demarcation. We want to change children in this age group to transit according to the level that they have acquired, without even having saying class 1 or class 2. But are we prepared for that? That is what this committee felt. And if you read our report, the draft NEP of 2019, we have actually said between 3 to 8, it will not be any class-based learning. It would be flexible to children to move according to their ability, and at the end of class 2, or technically the age 8, as we say, then the child going into the class 3, where the structured learning actually starts with textbooks and other activities. That was the idea. But we have not. And the start date for this, please let us be clear, once we have the National Curriculum Framework for School Education, which the Honorable Prime Minister in his talk said would be from 2022, I think that is when we would actually start moving towards this new alignment that we are talking about. But that doesn't preclude any institution from already moving in their early years towards this new approach to teaching learning. Nothing precludes that. It is nothing that says, because it's only an approach to learning. You are not doing anything in terms of the investment. You are actually using the teachers and the other resources to look at this new approach of flexibility for a child's learning and allowing all their mental capacities to be honed up in a very unstructured manner in the foundational stage. So nothing prevents you from doing that, but the curriculum date would be from 2020. regarding your assessment of class 3, 5 and 8, we have clearly said appropriate authority because we are aware that there are school boards. But if a particular state government would not like to have a kind of a board level examination, but would like to say that it could be done by the schools themselves, the idea not being to eliminate students, but rather to understand whether the children have understood what is required to be understood by a class 3 student so that they can transit, and where remedial action is needed, take remedial action, rather than saying that you are failed or you should be kicked out of the system. That is not the idea. The idea is to track the students' progress, and that will be done depending upon the consensus that the new National Assessment Center in consultation with the school boards will arrive at and work out the strategies for that. At the moment, we have only said that because we thought that these were the critical stages where if we did not help out a student and help the student to assess, the parent to assess, and the teacher to assess how much has that child understood or learned to move into the next class, whether remedial action is needed for language or for maths or for science or for any other subject of music or dance or sports, whatever it is, or is that child so talented that the child should be fast-tracked. To get this assessment, we have talked about the class 3, class 5 and class 8, and it would be decided only when we actually start arriving at a decision by taking on board the school boards, the NCRT, the CBSE, the state governments and the government of India talking to each other in an engaging and in a democratized manner, arriving at a consensus decision.
Yes, ma'am. It was rightly pointed out by you that, it all depends upon how we take it and how we take forward, because it's all, as in your talk itself, when you said, I'm very passionate about it and a teacher too. And you said it very proudly, that too. And that was the sentence which moved us. And I also strongly feel that from these discussions, it was very clear. Even there are some queries from parents who are asking that even though we have flexibility even now, but many of the schools resort to rote learning and assessment of children like that. And I personally have a thought in my mind. We are in need of nearly 10 lakhs of teachers all across the country, because the teacher are the people who have to be, as rightly said to you, the professional dignity which had to come to the teacher's profession is to be in a due course of time, has to come up. Otherwise, there are people who are, they take teaching as the last resort and come to this, because this is a profession where you need to change the attitude of parents, change the attitude of teachers, and even encouraging. It is not children who are to be blamed. It is the people as teachers and parents who have to build the creativity, the curiosity, and whatever it is. So sufficient number of teachers and training them and making them empowerment is really a great challenge. But I personally feel, ma'am, and that entrusting everything to the government and looking at to the government to do everything for us as the stakeholders, as private school teachers and principals, I personally feel the policy which you have put your head into it is a policy which gives a freedom of innovations, freedom of practice to the independent schools, which naturally will be a benefit for all of us, because if we want to bring out creativity, innovations in academics, innovations in our schools, it is very much possible. That is the flexibility which I have to say hats off to you for putting such a head into such a wonderful policy, if it is being taken up and implemented in the right way with all the challenges. And now next it is, before, it was great interacting to you, but to sum up what we had in the discussion, we have Dr. George Kolanjeri from Principal of Crescent Public School. May I request, sir, to just sum up what were the discussions were?
Okay, yes. Dear respected Dr. Shakila Shamsu, dear moderators, Mr. Francis K., Dr. Binumon, Dr. Deepa Chandran, Mr. T. Prem Kumar, and the host of the program, Mr. Prasid Prasad. Very good afternoon to everyone. Yes, dear participants,
Dear friends, we have been discussing on the topic National Education Policy and its various dimensions, how it's going to affect different realms of the society, or how is the implementation part of it going to be done. Ma'am Shakila rightly said, the unique potential of every individual child is to be squeezed and it should be led to the holistic development of every individual child. That's the prime objective of the new national education policy. Ma'am again emphasized saying that the policy is learner-centered. Ma'am re-emphasized the importance of early childhood education, along with other domains like school education, teacher education, and adult education. While talking about all these, ma'am specified that the age group starting from 0 to 6, that's the most crucial period of the development of a child's brain, where the teacher has to be influenced, or the teacher has to focus on the development of the child. The most striking point was, we sometimes spoil the ability of the child to think differently. I would like to link the thought of Sir Ken Robinson, who said, do schools kill the creativity of our children? Putting them all in one funnel, making them think in the same way, spoiling or killing their creative thinking or critical thinking. We never allow them to do that. So maybe it's a total deviation from the traditional methods of teaching learning process. That's why ma'am mentioned certain ventures that have already been taken up the CBSE, like experiential learning, joyful learning, art integration, multidisciplinary teaching. So all these aspects have rightly been taken by CBSE to be implemented properly. What about other state government schools? Are they aware of these facts? I would like to highlight one point, ma'am. I think it was in 1994, DPEP, District Primary Education Program, which was centrally sponsored. It was launched in Kerala also in 1994, and the teachers were trained properly. And of course, in the beginning, yes, they were able to implement it successfully to an extent, of course. Now, are we going to implement the functional areas or the practical areas apart from the strategic dimensions of national education policy? Are we going to train our teachers in a unified manner? There comes the importance of, may I go through a few questions raised by our dear Francis sir. Francis sir told, let me know about the functional differences. Then different boards like CBSE, ICSE, etc. state boards are there. How are we going to integrate the activities of these boards? What is the assessment system at state compared to CBSE or central syllabus? Are we going to have an integrated assessment system? Maybe more or less the same questions were raised by other moderators as well. When Dr. Deepa was mentioning about this point. Then Dr. Binamon also mentioned, okay, Dr. Binamon's highlight was about vocational education courses. It's well and good. See, from my experience, as I had been working abroad, there that system already existed. What is that? Once a student completes the first year of study, the student is awarded with diploma. Second year completion, postgraduate diploma. And the third year, it's graduation. I'm so happy and excited to see that system is going to be implemented in India as well. Of course, it's going to give some credit to the candidates who are not able to complete their course of 3 or 4 years, but who will be dropping the course after first or second year. The credit will be there for them. Dr. Binimon's another concern was about bilingual textbook, and ma'am has rightly told, Shakila ma'am has rightly told that yes, there will be other central institutes or language universities or bodies who will be framing this work. Then another concern was about 2-level exams, whether we will be able to introduce the 2-level exams according to the caliber of each student for different subjects, as we are having for mathematics at the moment. We don't know how the implementation part will be, how successful we will be. I just remember at this point that I read a caption which goes like this: before teaching Bloom's taxonomy, we should tell the students about Abraham Harold Maslow's hierarchy of needs, who was an American psychologist, who talks to us about the physiological needs, then the belongingness of love needs, the self-esteem, then self-actualization, likewise 5 needs, the hierarchy. We should introduce and fulfill those needs of a student before we introduce the Bloom's taxonomy to them. So my major concern as a person or as an educationist in the field of education for more than 27, 28 years in India and abroad, how the implementation of this policy will take place. I mean, maybe a lot of groundwork is required. Mr. Prem Kumar was citing a few things like who will conduct the assessment as per the unified structure. What about the Teacher Education Institute? See, all these questions are of high concerns, high importance, high relevance. We know in a fine morning, we may not be able to rectify all this system. At the same time, we can say that whatever existed till the launch of national education policy is a waste. It did not produce any result. We can never say, isn't it? Yes, I hope you all agree, and I too. I mean, it had its own result. Always, only thing, there were rooms for improvement, and now the new committee has been constituted. They worked hard. They spent nights and days and they drafted the new policy. Of course, the majority of the country or the educationist sector, they are appreciating the new education policy. Of course, there are merits and demerits. Now, it depends upon how it's being implemented. As Francis sir mentioned rightly, there was a continuous assessment system before in our CBSE syllabus. It was continued maybe for 1 or 2 years, and right from the implementation part, something went wrong and we got done away with that. We are not continuing that system. So generally speaking, a few concerns, and I am going to wind up, is like which books will be followed. When we are going to focus on the life skills of the students, candidates, according to their taste, what about the competitive exams in our country? Still, we will be focusing on the NEET, JEE and all for the high achievers, and where are the low achievers? Where is their position? If they are going to pursue their study according to their taste, music, arts, dance and all, will they be able to earn their livelihood? Will the government be able to meet their source of income? Because as I have worked in North India also, there it's part of school education as well as college, university education. BA in Tabla, BA in music, BA in Bharatanatyam, I mean, so many courses are there. So are they able to lead a standardized life? Are they able to meet the normal requirements of their life? So many things, so many questions are coming to my mind. And as ma'am, Shakila ma'am mentioned, for the assistance exams, we found so many BTech graduates are coming. Or postgraduates are coming for the, see, the basic qualification for a police constable is class 10. Whereas the candidates are mostly graduates and postgraduates. We cannot say that it's not because they did not learn anything. They studied, but they were not able to find a job according to their knowledge, and they are forced to get into another job. So many concerns, and as educationists, it's coming to our mind. To an extent, we will be able to solve these issues, and slowly all these things will turn to be positive. As the saying in Sanskrit goes, Acharyat Padamadate, Padam Shishya Somedaya, Sabrahmacharibhya Padam Kalakramenacha. So once the new education policy is being introduced, the student will be able to pursue his career or his or her higher education. The first quarter from the teacher, the second quarter from his classmates, the third one from his own life experience, and the last quarter of his life will be in the due course of his life. Thank you so much. I feel so proud to share this platform with eminent scholars and educators, and of course the participants who are really interested to listen about this one, to learn about this, to explore and to make changes in the world. Thank you so much for listening to me. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George sir, for the sum up. Let me take a single minute of time to thank everyone who have been a part of this great event. Since we are running out of time, I'll just wind up quickly. I'd like to first of all thank Dr. Shakila ma'am, who gave us a date for the event 2 months in advance. Thank you, ma'am, for the snippets of wisdom from your end. Second, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the lead moderator of the day, Dr. Deepa Chandran. Next, I would like to give my thanks to Francis K, who started the discussion from the moderator's end. My big thanks to Dr. Vinamon VR. And again, my thanks to Mr. T. Prem Kumar, who joined us from Kuwait with this set of questions. And again to Dr. George for the sum up. So thank you everyone. That was great having you all under the same umbrella. And thanks again from Team Password. And it would be great if the participants who are currently online, if we can give a feedback about the session in the chat box. That's going to really help us to have real-time feedback, and this would really assist us in creating similar programs in the future. So thank you very much and have a great evening. And thanks again from Team Password. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it was a pleasure. And let us work towards implementing it with the individual autonomy that we have as teachers and educational institutions. Policies evolve and we should flow with the time. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.